Hello everyone, if you have your own paranormal experiences you'd like to share, please send them to our channel. Remember, we're not looking for fiction, but real accounts of unexplained events. Stay safe out there, and remember, not all ghosts are scary. Some just need help finding their way home. The real estate agent's hands trembled as she slid the keys across the table. "Just so you know," Margaret whispered, her eyes darting toward the contract. "The previous owners only lasted 3 months." Sarah Chen should have asked more questions. She should have wondered why a 4-bedroom farmhouse on 20 acres was selling for less than a studio apartment in the city. But after her divorce, after losing the custody battle, after watching her life crumble like wet paper, she needed escape. She needed silence. She needed Hollow Creek. The farmhouse sat at the end of a winding dirt road, surrounded by overgrown fields that whispered secrets to the wind. It was a beautiful prison of peeling white paint and sagging shutters, with windows that reflected the sky like dead eyes. The porch groaned under Sarah's weight as she climbed the steps that first October evening, her footsteps echoing in a rhythm that sounded almost like warning. Inside, the air tasted old. Dust motes danced in the amber light filtering through filthy windows, and the floorboards creaked conversations in a language Sarah didn't yet understand. The previous owners had left in a hurry. Their furniture remained, positioned at odd angles as if they'd been rearranged in panic. A child's drawing hung crooked on the refrigerator, depicting a house with black scribbles covering every window. That first night, Sarah convinced herself the sounds were just the house settling. Old houses made noise. Everyone knew that. The footsteps in the hallway were pipes expanding. The whispers were wind through the walls. The shadow that passed her bedroom door at 3:47 a.m. was a trick of moonlight. She almost believed it. On the third night, Sarah woke to find all her clothes removed from the closet and arranged in a circle on the floor. Each piece had been turned inside out. In the center of the circle, written in what looked like ash, were the words, "We see you now." Her hands shook as she called the police. Officer Martinez arrived with skepticism etched on his weathered face, but it faded when he saw the message. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "how much do you know about this property?" "Just that it's old. Built in 1847, I think." Martinez pulled off his hat, turning it over in his hands. "The Hollow Creek Massacre. You've never heard of it?" When Sarah shook her head, he continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 1889. The Carver family lived here. Father, mother, 3 children. One morning, the mailman found them in the dining room, all seated around the table. Dead for at least a week. But here's the thing that never made the history books: they were arranged like they were still eating breakfast. Eyes sewn open. Mouths positioned mid-sentence. And someone had been caring for them, changing their clothes, moving them around the house even after death. Who? They never found out. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of anyone else living here. Just those 5 bodies and one detail that made even the hardened investigators sick. He paused, swallowing hard. The youngest daughter, Emma, they found her diary. The entries continued for 3 days after the coroner determined she'd died. Same handwriting. Same habits. But the words. He trailed off. What did they say? "The shadows are teaching me to be still." Over and over. 3 days worth. After Martinez left, Sarah stood in her living room, suddenly aware of how the shadows fell. They didn't quite match the furniture, she realized. They were close, but not exact. It was like looking at a photograph where someone had photoshopped the shadows incorrectly. Once she noticed, she couldn't stop seeing it. The dining room was worse. 6 chairs surrounded the table, though Sarah had only brought 5 into the house. The 6th had simply appeared, pulled out slightly, as if someone had just stood up. Dust covered the other chairs, but the 6th was clean. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She sat in the living room with every light blazing, watching the shadows. At 2:15 a.m., she saw one move. Not the jerky movement of flickering light, but a deliberate slide across the wall, independent of any object that could cast it. It oozed along the wallpaper like oil, leaving a trail of frost that glittered in the lamplight. The shadow had the shape of a little girl. Sarah ran to her car, keys clutched in her fist. But when she reached the front door, it wouldn't open. The deadbolt turned smoothly, the knob twisted, but the door remained sealed as if the frame had fused solid. She threw her weight against it, screaming, as shadows began peeling themselves from every wall, each one shaped like a person, each one moving with impossible fluidity. They didn't touch her. They surrounded her, a circle of darkness wearing human forms, and then they became still. Perfectly, utterly still. Sarah's screams died in her throat as she realized what they wanted. They wanted her to join them. To learn to be still. She found herself back in bed at dawn with no memory of how she got there. Her body ached like she'd been holding the same position for hours. When she stumbled to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, she screamed. Her reflection held its position for 3 full seconds after she moved. The shadows were teaching her. Sarah tried everything. Salt lines, which the shadows simply flowed over. Cameras, which showed only static when played back. A priest, who refused to enter after standing on the porch for less than a minute, whispering prayers and backing away. "This isn't a haunting," he said, pale and shaking. "This is something that was here before. Something the house was built on top of. You need to leave. Tonight." But Sarah couldn't leave. She'd tried the doors, the windows, even breaking through the walls. Every exit led her back inside, depositing her in a different room as if the house was shuffling her between its spaces like cards in a deck. The farmhouse had decided she belonged here, and it wouldn't let her go. On the 7th night, Sarah stopped fighting. Exhaustion had carved her hollow, and the shadows felt almost comforting now, familiar as old friends. She sat at the dining table in the 6th chair, the clean one, and waited. They came as darkness fell. 5 shadows detached from the walls, each one settling into a chair. Sarah could see them more clearly now, or perhaps she was learning their language. The father at the head of the table, tall and broad. The mother to his right, her shadow hands folded in her lap. 3 children, including Emma, the youngest, directly across from Sarah. Emma's shadow turned toward her, and Sarah heard a voice that came from inside her own head. "You're learning. Good. It's easier when you don't fight." "What are you?" Sarah whispered. "We're what happens when you stay too long. When you become part of the house. We tried to leave too, but the shadows caught us. They've been here since before the house, before the land had a name. They need people to give them shape. To give them form. We fed them for a while, but we're fading. The house needs fresh shadows." "I won't." "You already are." Emma's shadow pointed to the wall behind Sarah. Sarah turned and saw her own shadow cast by the lamp. It was perfectly still, not moving with her body. As she watched in horror, it waved at her. The thing wearing her shadow's shape smiled with too many teeth. Weeks blurred into months. Sarah stopped trying to track time. The shadows taught her their stillness, and piece by piece, she felt herself coming apart. First, her reflection stopped matching her movements entirely, acting out scenes from lives she'd never lived. Then her voice began to echo seconds after she spoke, overlapping itself in harmonies that made her teeth ache. Her body cast multiple shadows now, each one moving independently, each one a little more solid than the last. She understood now. The shadows weren't ghosts. They were something older, something that existed in the spaces between light and dark. They were hungry for human experience, for the weight of flesh and the heat of blood, and they learned by consuming the people who stayed too long. The Carver family had fed them for over a century, but shadows wear out their borrowed shapes eventually. The house needed new material. On a February morning, Sarah watched from the window as a car pulled up the long driveway. A young couple emerged, holding hands, their faces bright with hope. The real estate agent, a new one, Margaret had quit months ago, gestured enthusiastically at the property. Sarah tried to scream a warning, but her voice came out as static. She tried to run to the door, but her legs moved in reverse, carrying her backward into the dining room. The shadows had almost finished with her now. She was more absence than presence, more echo than substance. The couple entered the house, their laughter ringing through the rooms like bells. Sarah watched from the corner, her body barely casting any light anymore, as they explored what would become their prison. The man noticed the dining room table with its 6 chairs and smiled. "Perfect for dinner parties," he said. Sarah wanted to weep, but she'd forgotten how. The shadows had taken that too. That night, the couple slept soundly in the master bedroom, unaware that 7 shadow figures stood around their bed, studying them, learning them. One shadow was fresher than the others, still remembering what it felt like to be Sarah Chen, still clinging to fragments of identity like a drowning person clutches debris. By morning, the couple would notice small things. Sounds that didn't quite make sense. Shadows that fell wrong. And if they tried to leave, they'd find what Sarah had learned: the Hollow Creek farmhouse never lets go. In the dining room, a 7th chair appeared at the table, pulled out slightly, waiting. The shadows were always hungry. And they were very, very patient. Officer Martinez retired the following week. He'd driven past the farmhouse and seen curtains moving in windows, shadows arranging themselves into tableaus. He'd seen 7 distinct silhouettes in the dining room, all perfectly still, all watching the road. When he filed his report suggesting the property be condemned, it was mysteriously lost. 3 months later, the farmhouse sold again. The shadows always find new students. And the lessons at Hollow Creek never end. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and then share with your friends. Your support helps us grow and create even more awesome content. We appreciate you being part of the journey. Here are a couple more videos for you to check out.